यो नादः सर्वभूतानां सर्ववर्णस्य चाङ्कुरः यो बीजं मन्त्रकोटीनां तं नित्यं प्रणमाम्यहम्. Namaste to one and all. I hope all of you have had a very fulfilling and vibrant Gauri Ganesha festival. It is a matter of great honor and pleasure for me to be giving this talk, which is hosted by Center for Indic Studies, Indus University. And as all of you know, the topic for today is the philosophy of Carnatic music and its Vedic roots. Now, before I actually get into the subject matter, I would want to establish the fundamental or the basic premise of my talk. Sanatana Dharma, or the Indic civilization, or the Bharatiyata, or the Indianness, the Hindu Samskriti, or the Indian culture that we all belong to, is primarily Vaidika Samskriti. The Vedas, the Apaurushaya Vedas, which is the earliest available literature known to mankind, undoubtedly. They are the bedrock or the backbone or the very essence of Sanatana Dharma. And all our branches of knowledge in the form of the Shastras, the knowledge systems, the Darshanas, which are the philosophies, the Vedangas, the supplementary texts to the Vedas, the sciences like astronomy, which is Jyotisha, mathematics, which is Ganita, medicine, which is Ayurveda, chemistry, which is Rasayana Shastra, our beliefs and value systems, our agricultural practices, our economics, which is Arthashastra, all our art forms like Sangeeta, Nritya and Shilpa, architecture, which is Vastu Shastra, our literature, which is Kavya or Sahitya, our religious practices, the festivals that we celebrate, our temple traditions, the rituals that we follow, our customs, our day-to-day life, all that we do, the languages that we speak, the ideas that we communicate, our food habits, our dressing styles, and so on and so on and so on, are all manifestations of this Vaidika Samskriti. So all that we are, all that we do, all that we think, and all that we believe in as Hindus, as Sanatanis, as Indians, essentially comes under the broad umbrella of the Vedas. Now we need to understand the basic philosophy of arts in the Indian tradition. Art, which is no doubt universal. How is it perceived in India, is the question. The Western civilization believes that knowledge is power. So knowledge is considered as a tool or as a means or as a weapon to conquer the world. So if you want to be powerful, you have to gain knowledge. Knowledge is something which makes you powerful. Whereas the Indian perspective has been totally the opposite. Our rishis and mystics and our sadhakas advocated sa vidya ya vimuktaye. Vidya or knowledge. What is vidya? That which liberates you is vidya. That which makes you closer to the supreme reality is vidya. That which makes you experience the supreme being is vidya. So you can see a complete contrast there in the perspective between the Western thought and the Indian thought. And it is interesting to note that The ancient Indians have called all branches of knowledge as arts, and they have classified 64 arts. There is a very well-known concept of Chatushashti Kalaha. So everything, any branch of knowledge, any body of knowledge was considered as an art, and that was the outlook. And for centuries, India has been acknowledged for her profound concept of aesthetics, called as Saundarya Shastra on one hand, her philosophical outlook towards art on the other hand, and also her comprehensive and holistic approach to art. So this blend or this combination is so important, these two facets, and they are never independent of each other. The element of one is invariably present in the other. And this blend is so beautifully done. This balance is so well struck without one having to be given up for the sake of the other. So the aesthetic element, the aesthetic appeal, the aesthetic aspect of art and the philosophical dimension of art have gone hand in hand. In fact, they have nourished each other. They have supported and supplemented each other. And this is something which is very unique in the Indian tradition. The ideas of art creation, art appreciation, and art experience have reached magnificent heights in the hands of great masters like Bharata, Anandavardhana, Someshwara, and many such other masters. Next, we need to see what is the goal of art in India, or what is the purpose of art, what is the ultimate aim of what art tries to achieve. The crux of Indian art forms is rasa. It is the ultimate purpose of any art. In fact, any artistic attempt which has all the necessary ingredients but devoid of rasa is not at all considered any worthwhile. Bharata in his Natya Shastra says, Nahi rasadhrite kaschidartha pravartate. Without rasa, without the element of rasa, art is meaningless. And the intensity, depth, and the comprehensiveness that have gone into the study of the theory of rasa in the Indian tradition fails to find a parallel anywhere in the world. And it is interesting that the rasa theory, which was conceived of several centuries ago, is India's contribution to world thought, which the West is still trying to study and understand. Okay, so they still haven't come any close to what it has to be. How do we understand this art? Art is basically creation of any beautiful thing, and it must have both emotive as well as intellectual appeal. And it is undeniable that the primary purpose of any art is to entertain, no doubt about it. But the uniqueness or the speciality is that art in India has never been perceived as a mere means of entertainment. Rather, it is meant to provide an experience, both within and beyond, and to elevate one emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually through what we call as rasanubhava. And this is what makes Indian art unique. I would like to share with you all a small verse, a Sanskrit verse that I had composed, which actually brings out this idea. Bharatiyam idam sarvam vedamulam prakirtitam. All that is Bharatiya, all that is Indian, has its roots in the Vedas. Sanatanam jaganmanyam dharmadi parashilanam. It is Sanatana, it is eternal. It is Jaganmanya, it is respected world over. Dharmadi parashilanam. It is based on the principles of the four Purusharthas, which is Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Asti yasya param lakshyam sa vidya ya vimuktaye. It has as its highest ideal sa vidya ya vimuktaye. It is the Samskriti, or it is a civilization which believes that knowledge is that which makes you closer to the supreme reality. It is a means to reach the supreme truth. Kavya Shastra Kala Rupam, and it manifests the Bharatiyata or the Vaidika Samskriti that we are talking of. It takes the form of Kavya, Shastra, and Kala. Kavya is the literature, Shastra are the sciences, and Kala arts. So it manifests itself in the form of literature, sciences, and arts, the ultimate goal of which is Anubhuti Pradayakam, to provide an experience. And this is the unique approach in the Indian tradition, which we don't get to see this in other cultures. And it is this aspect of transcendence, which is the fountainhead, which is both the fountainhead as well as the ultimate goal in the Indian tradition, whether it is rasa in arts or jnana in Vedanta or samadhi in yoga, whatever you take, that aspect of transcendence is what makes the Indian perspective different from other cultures of the world. Now we need to specifically come to the basic philosophy of music in the Indian tradition. We saw how art was perceived in India. How is music perceived in India? Music is the most abstract art, and it is often considered as the finest of fine arts. And it has always occupied a central place in the imagination of Indians. The range of musical phenomenon in India extends from simple melodies commonly heard among hill tribes to what is one of the most well-developed systems of classical music in the world. So you have both the ends of the spectrum. On one side, you have the simplest tribal melodies and folk melodies. And on the other side, you have the most sophisticated, well-developed, scientific and complex system of classical music. And that is what Indian music is all about. It has been an inevitable part of Indian society from the very early times. And no occasion in the life of an Indian, whether it is happy or sad, whether it is big or small, whether it is a festival or a funeral, whatever it is, any occasion in the life of an Indian is incomplete without music. It doesn't, in fact, no occasion passes without music, and music has been an inevitable part of the life of an Indian, and it is embedded in the system. And there are too many innumerable number of references that we can quote from the Vedas, Puranas, and a wide range of ancient, medieval, as well as modern literature, which talks about the role of music in all walks of Indian life. But beyond all this, to an Indian artist, all art forms are manifestations of beauty. The Supreme Being has throughout been regarded as the personification, creator and lover of beauty, and therefore the aim of all art forms in India, and particularly music, is to experience him. And this fundamental notion gives rise to the concept of Nada Brahman. The Supreme Being is conceived of or considered as the very embodiment of Nada, and the role or the aim of art is to experience the Supreme Brahman, who is considered as Nada Brahman or the very form of Nada, through Nadopasana, which is worship of Nada. And anyone who lives this life is considered as a Nada Yogi, and that way of life is Nada Yoga. And these lofty concepts, very profound concepts, such as Nada Brahman, Nadopasana, and Nada Yoga, they are India's exclusive contribution to the world. And it is notable that ours is the only musical tradition in the world where all composers are saints, seers, and spiritual masters. And the compositions of these saint composers, whom we call as Santa Vagyakaras, they are not just products of dry intellectual exercise, but they are spontaneous outpourings or products of divine inspiration. And that is what makes our saint composers so great and revered. Art in India, Indian music is not just an art that entertains, but it is a deep science that refines and purifies the mind. But beyond that, it is a powerful tool that provides an experience and uplifts or elevates both the sadhaka, who's the practitioner, as well as the rasika, who's the listener. So ultimately, what we understand from this is that Indian music is undoubtedly a spiritual practice having a sacred dimension. It is impossible to think of it being divorced from this essential background. And I cannot emphasize this enough. The sacred dimension is what makes Indian music what it is. And Indian music is something which has social relevance, religious background, a scientific dimension, as well as a spiritual goal. And this is the holistic approach that we have towards music in our tradition. We need to quickly go through the various stages in the history and evolution of Carnatic music to understand how it is tied to Sanatana Dharma or the Vedic roots at various levels. Now it is a well-known fact that India is the mother of world civilizations, and it is here that we can trace the origin of human culture. So obviously, Indian music is the oldest music system of the world. And how do we trace the origin of this Indian music? There are several theories. The first theory is that music originates from nature. Nature is man's guru in the creation of music. The different kinds of melodious and beautiful sounds that are present in nature in the form of the chirping of the birds, the humming of the bee, the roaring of the ocean, and so on. They provide the necessary inspiration for man. And in an attempt to imitate the sounds of nature, man gets involved in the creation of music. And our Shiksha Shastras give a lot of details with respect to the relationship between the sounds of certain animals and birds and the swaras that we use in music. You know, like the swara sa comes from the peacock, the swara re comes from the ox, swara ga comes from the goat, and so on. The second theory with regard to the origin of music is that music has a divine origin. Music originated from gods and goddesses. And there are plenty of references available in Ramayana, Mahabharata, the Puranas, the Vedas, and the Upanishads with regard to the ragas, the talas, the types of compositions, the kinds of musical instruments, how they are made, the quality of nada, the quality of what is shruti, what is swara, you know, these kind of technical aspects relating to music. You have plenty of references available in the Vedic literature as well as in the Itihasas and the Puranas. And we all know of Goddess Saraswati who plays the veena, Bhagavan Krishna who plays the flute, Bhagavan Shiva who plays the damaru, and we also know about Narada who plays the veena, Tumburu who plays the tambura, and so on. And also we have a class of celestial beings in the form of Gandharvas, Yakshas, Kinnaras, and Apsaras who are involved in different types of music and dance. Folk music also has a considerable amount of influence on our classical music. Even today, some of our very prominent ragas like Yadukula Kamboji, Ananda Bhairavi, Punnagavarali, these kind of ragas, you can see the influence of folk music. So over a period of time, the elements of folk music were integrated into our system, and folk music has a considerable influence on the way Carnatic music has evolved and shaped. The theory that music originated from Samaveda is probably the most accepted theory by most scholars, and it is considered to be the most authentic. Indian music has its roots in the Samaveda, and Indian music is often called as Gandharva Veda, which is considered as an Upaveda of Samaveda. And the system of Sapta Swaras that we use in our music, Sari, Gama, Padani, they were formulated on the basis of the Triswara Paddhati that was used in the chanting of the Vedas. In those days, the Udatta, Anudatta, Swarita, these three swaras or these three pitches were used in the chanting of the Vedas. First it was Archika, Gathika, Samika. The use of three swaras is actually called Samika. Then it became Swarantara, which is 4 swaras. Then Audava, which is 5 swaras. Shadava, which is 6 swaras. And finally, Sapta, Sampurna, which is a full-fledged scheme of 7 swaras that we use in our music. If you have come across the Vedic chanting, how it is done, Ni sari sa ni sari ni ri sa ni ri ri sa ni sari. So you have the 3 swaras which are used there, and this expanded. The ni sari, one swara was added below, another swara was added on top, and then it became from 3 it became 5, and from 5 it became 7, until we reached a full-fledged scheme of Sapta Swaras. And this again is India's exclusive contribution to world musicology. Any other system of music that you come across in the world also has the same 7, it's been taken from Indian music, in fact. And till date, no one has been able to add an 8th swara or remove a swara from this list of 7 swaras. So 7 swaras is sealed, and it has to be accepted, whatever is the form of music. Our most important musical instruments like the veena, venu, which is flute, the mridanga, etc. These kind of instruments were used during the Samavedic times, and they were used as the accompaniment when the Saman chants were done. And these instruments are so beautifully designed, technically perfect, and the way in which they are made, aesthetically and technically so perfect that you can hardly imagine how our ancient masters had that much of knowledge and scientific approach when it comes to making of musical instruments. And gradually, over a period of time, Indian music evolved into a classical system of music. It came within the bounds of a Shastra. Shastra is a science. It came to be an organized or systematic body of knowledge. And how it happened was several texts on musicologies came to be written. And because of this, our music got the base of a Shastra, a Shastric framework. And the role of these texts on musicology was to specify the do's and don'ts, the rules and regulations as to how the system of music should be practiced and how it should grow. And Natya Shastra of Bharata, which is composed as early as 2nd century BCE. It's placed between 2nd century BCE and 2nd century AD, AD or BC. AD or CE. I'm sorry. Even before that, we have the Dattilam, which is not available now. And after Natya Shastra, we have several other texts like Matanga's Brihadeshi, then Narada's Sangeeta Makaranda, then Chalukya Someshwara's Manasollasa, and so on. So many texts on musicologies were written by the Shastrakaras, and this enabled music to evolve in a good, well-defined framework. And in ancient India, Indian music, it had 2 facets. It had 2 phases. One was the Marga and the other was Deshi. Marga Sangeeta is that music which was classical, which was more textual, which had pan-Indian significance, and which conformed to the rules laid down in the Shastras, particularly Bharata's Natya Shastra. And Desi, on the other hand, were musical forms which were created based on the regional flavors, the tastes and preferences of people living in different regions, the regional variations. So that Marga and Deshi were the 2 phases of Indian music in the ancient during the ancient times. And several kings who belonged to several dynasties in ancient India, like the Mauryas, Guptas, Cholas, Chalukyas, Rashtrakutas, they patronized music, and music flourished very well in that ecosystem. And around the same time, in southern part of India, in Tamil Nadu particularly, the rich literature in the form of Sangam, Silapadigaram, they also have a lot of material, lot of valuable material pertaining to music. And around the 6th to 10th centuries, we have the Tevarams and the Divya Prabandhams, which were composed. And around the 10th century, Prabandha, which is a significant type of composition, that came to be composed around that time, 10th, 11th centuries. of which Jayadeva Kavi's Gita Govinda is a classic example. 12th century CE is another important milestone. It is the time when Sangeeta Ratnakara, an authoritative treatise on Indian music, was composed by Sharangadeva, and it is considered as one of the most important treatises on Indian musicology, which is considered both by Carnatic as well as Hindustani music. And it is after that time, around the 13th century, with the Muslim invasion, which brought with it the Persian and Arabic styles. And this marked the beginning of Hindustani music, or to be more precise, the Khayal music in the northern part of India. So this is the, so till then, as I had explained earlier, till then, Marga Sangeeta was there, which was textual, and you had regional variations. Okay, Saurashtra region had one variation, the Dravida region had another variation. These kind of regional variations were there. But it was after the Muslim invasion and after the influence of the Persian and Arabic styles that a separate system of music called the Hindustani music came about. And this led to Indian music being separated into two different classical systems. The Hindustani, which flourished in the northern part of India, and the South Indian classical music, which later came to be called as Carnatic music. And the music of the South suffered much less invasion or onslaught or destruction or distortion when compared to the music of the North. So that enabled the music of the southern part to retain its sacredness and divinity. So music continued to thrive or flourish in temples and in religious places. So that element of sacredness was retained. And after that, a galaxy of gifted composers in the form of Vachanakaras, including Basavanna and Akkamahadevi, Annamacharya, Arunagirinathar, the illustrious Haridasas of Karnataka, among whom Purandaradasa and Kanakadasa are quite prominent, Narayana Tirtha, Bhadrachala Ramadasa, Uttukad, Venkatakavi, Kshetrajna, and many, many, many more such great saint composers. They have enriched the Carnatic music literature with their divine compositions. And we need to be so grateful to them for that contribution. And it was Sri Purandaradasa who is credited with the formulation of the methodical lessons for the beginners. And he's the one who formulated the Carnatic music pedagogy, which is so scientific, and it is practiced even today after centuries. Nobody has been able to change. There was no need to change it. It was so perfect, full-fledged and scientific. It was complete on its own. And during the same time, this was during the medieval time, the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries, Shastra also evolved. The Raga and Tala systems evolved, and it came to be, it evolved and it developed, and the Melakarta Paddhati was formulated, and several changes and improvements and additions happened in the on the Shastra side of music, the Lakshana aspect of music. And the next phase was the 18th century CE, which is considered as the golden age of Carnatic music. And this period is the time when we had the illustrious Trimurtis, who are identified as Sadguru Sri Tyagaraja Swami, Sri Muttaswami Dikshitar, and Sri Shama Shastri. And their contribution to the system of Carnatic music is so immense that the concept of musical composition or a kriti, it actually reached its pinnacle during the time of the Trinity. And during the same time, music got the patronage of the Nayaks, the Marathas, who were ruling in the southern part of India, and also the Mysore Vadayars, many of whom were not just patrons, but musicians and composers themselves. And by around 1850, based on three important things, the foundation actually was laid by three important things. One is the system of pedagogy of Purandaradasa. The other is the Melakarta Paddhati, which was formulated by Venkatamakim, and later it was refined by Govinda Acharya. And the third thing was the compositions of the Trimurtis. Based on these three important things, Carnatic music acquired a completeness. It came to its most evolved state. And after the time of the Trinity, we had many more composers who are identified as post-Trinity composers, and they added to the Carnatic music repertoire different types of compositional forms in the form of Varanas, Javalis, Tillanas, and so on, and that further enriched our treasure of compositions. And it was during the 20th century, the 1900s, that Carnatic music reached its present day form. Music in the ancient time, which was confined to temples, which in the medieval time it was brought to the courts, and finally it entered the public domain. Sabhas were started, and public performances of Carnatic music, started to happen. The Carnatic music concerts started happening, and many legendary musicians, with their invaluable contribution to the system, have brought, given this great status to Carnatic music, and we have this great treasure with us because of the contribution of all these composers and musicians. So if you just go through the different stages in the history, development, and evolution of Carnatic music, we see that a lot of changes have happened. It is not that the Carnatic music has been static. It's ever dynamic. It is always changing. But any changes, our saint composers or the musicologists, who wrote the Shastras, or even the musicians who are on the performance domain, whatever they made, the changes they made, or the changes they brought in, it only added more value to the system. It was not something which was meant to strip, the Vedic roots, remove Carnatic music from its Vedic roots, or to distort it, or to destroy its essential character. So this is something which we need to keep in mind. Next, we need to understand the richness of Carnatic compositions. Carnatic music, to a great extent, depends on its compositions, and compositions are very important in Carnatic music. So what do these compositions offer is very important to understand at this point of time. Bhakti is the essential sentiment. Okay, most of our compositions are Bhakti oriented. So we glorify gods, deities, gods and goddesses, and as I said, experiencing the supreme reality, experiencing the supreme being through music is the ultimate goal. So obviously bhakti or devotion is the main sentiment of Carnatic music, but it does not stop there. Okay, that is something. There are several other dimensions to it. The role of bhakti can never be undermined, but there is so much more to it. Our compositions convey various aspects of our dharma, philosophy, and culture. There are several compositions which talk about the abstract metaphysics and the sublime teachings of the Vedas, Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita. They propagate worldly and spiritual ideologies in very lucid words. And some examples are maybe Paramatmudu Velige, Manasu Swadhinamaina by Tyagaraja, Harichitta Satya by Purandaradasa, Ni Maye Olago Ninnolu Mayeyo by Kanakadasa, and so on. Many compositions beautifully summarize the tenets of Darshana, Jyotisha, temple architecture, and iconography, Sthala Puranas, Mantra Shastra, etc. For example, the Navavarana Kritis of Muthuswami Dikshitar. In addition to the scholarship of Sanskrit language, they give descriptive details rich in mystical symbolism of Tantra, Mantra, Yoga, and Sri Vidya. The Navagraha Kritis of Muthuswami Dikshitar give description of planetary deities using a wide range of terminology. Now, not just that, compositions conveying lofty moral values and great sacred truths are also a part of the Carnatic repertoire. They uphold values like individual sacrifice, non-violence, compassion, peaceful coexistence, selfless service, which actually touch all classes of humanity. We have very famous compositions by Purandaradasa, Acharya Villada Dharma Shravana Videtake, Chinta Nasti Kila by Sadashiva Brahmendra, to quote as a few examples. And though Bhakti is the underlying sentiment, within the ambit of Bhakti, there are so many compositions which have explored all the rasas. You have compositions which bring out Shringara rasa, you have compositions which depict Veera rasa, you have compositions which even have, Hasya rasa, Bhayanaka rasa, and so many rasas are explored. But it has not gone out of the bigger framework of Bhakti. That is what is to be kept in mind. Beyond all this, Carnatic compositions are awe-inspiring for their unsurpassed melody, lyrical beauty, aesthetic blend of Matu Dhatu. It is very noteworthy, the way in which the Sangeeta and the Sahitya, the musical and the literary aspect, are so aesthetically blended. And this is something we get to see only in Carnatic music and nowhere, in the world. And we need to be proud of this aspect, that our compositions are so rich, both poetically as well as musically. Concepts like Sangati, Swarakshara, Ragamudra, Chittaswara, Arthalankaras and Shabdalankaras, Samudaya Kritis, Yati patterns, Madhyamakala, and so on are testimony to the combination of scholarly intelligence and poetic excellence in our compositions. And also, wonderful musical concepts and possibilities have been explored through a wide variety of compositional forms like Varanas, Tillanas, Swarajatis, Krutis, Kirtanas, Padams, Javalis, and so on. The variety and the richness of compositional forms that we have is so special. And the compositions, Carnatic compositions, also have a great role to play in giving raga, the abstract entity called as raga. In giving raga a form, Carnatic compositions play a very big role. Our music is actually termed as Raga Sangeeta, and Raga is the hallmark of our music. So if an abstract entity like the Raga has to be given some form, and it has to survive for so many centuries, it is only because of the compositions in those ragas. So how do you define a raga? Raga is very abstract, it is very intangible. It is like a formless form. Okay, so if an abstract entity like the raga has to be given a form and it has to survive for centuries, it is only because of our compositions. And moreover, Manodharma, which is a salient feature of our music, Manodharma, or what we call as the creative aspect of music, the Kalpana Sangeeta, it depends on our compositions or Kalpita Sangeeta to a very great extent. So that is the role, importance, and significance of compositions in the Carnatic music system. Now, an overview of the history and evolution of Carnatic music and the richness and uniqueness of our compositional forms will give us an idea of the multi-dimensional character of Carnatic music. So it is very clear that ours is one of the most advanced, scientific, absolute, sublime, aesthetic, complex, and unique systems of music in the world. And I can go on adding qualifiers here. Probably if you ask a question as to what is there in Carnatic music, the answer might be too long. It is an endless list. But if you ask a question, what is not there in Carnatic music, probably the answer to that will be no, because there is nothing that is not there in Carnatic music. And this completeness has given it a very exalted place among the different musical systems of the world. And it is not just an art form that is born in some kind of a void. It is a very complex music culture that is fundamentally integrated with its Vedic, Sanatana, Dharmic roots and with the Hindu culture and ethos. So right from its origin, all the way through its different stages of evolution, we have seen how it is integrated with the Vaidika Samskriti, how it's integrated with Sanatana Dharma. So that is very important to note here. And this is, it's no doubt any classical art form anywhere in the world which has a long history cannot be viewed as separate from the cultural or historical context in which it is born, grown, and sustained. And Carnatic music is no exception to this. So we need to pay attention, or we need to be responsible towards the element of tradition and the history that is associated with such an art form, which has a history of many hundreds of years, a few thousands of years, in fact. It's an inseparable aspect of Vaidika Samskriti, right from its origin in the Samaveda through Sharangadeva to its evolution during the Trimurti era and all the way up to the current times. So nowhere can you see Carnatic music being divorced from the essential background of the Vaidika Samskriti. And it is an integrated whole. As I said earlier, aesthetics, the art element, and the sacredness have actually nurtured each other, and they have grown hand in hand. And it doesn't make sense to say that I just need your ragas and talas and the technical aspect, and I don't need your a sacredness. I don't need your devotion element. It doesn't make sense. The ragas that we use, the tala system that we follow, and even the gamakas that we use have so much of a cultural, religious significance. Okay, so they are so typical of our Vaidika Samskriti or Sanatana Dharma. So you cannot strip off the sacredness element from the bigger integrated whole, the holistic Carnatic music, which is art and sacredness combined. Antiquity is another great feature of Carnatic music, and as we have seen, as we have observed in the history of Carnatic music, after the Muslim invasion, after Hindustani music got separated as a separate system of classical music, Carnatic music, which was able to retain its sacredness and divinity, and it was subject to much lesser influence of foreign forces. So it can be considered as the present evolved form of the ancient music system of India. No doubt, a lot of changes have happened. We have adopted a lot of, those are called as Deshiya ragas. We have adopted a lot of ragas from North Indian music. We have taken different types of compositional forms from other systems of music, but not compromising on our core values. That is very important. So that antiquity, that link has been maintained. Spiritual preponderance, the Bhakti element. I cannot, emphasize this enough. If other musical forms are sensual, they give sensual pleasure. Carnatic music gives ethereal pleasure, and that is what makes Carnatic music so special. And it is definitely a means of elevation from temporal existence to the domain of ethereal joy through devotion. And that Bhakti element or the devotional element is the hallmark of Carnatic music. We have a rich treasure of compositions which have already gone through, what our compositions offer, and they are undoubtedly the heart and soul of Carnatic music. And ours is a traditional genre of music, no doubt, but the tradition is so rich, and it's and the framework that the tradition offers is so broad that there is ample scope for creativity. So those who argue that tradition is restricting, tradition is regressive, they come up with these kind of claims. It's become very common these days to come up with these claims and blaming tradition for whatnot. I actually pity them. They are either ignorant or they are sold out. It has to be one of the two. So there is ample scope for creativity, innovation, and imagination, which can be explored well within the framework of tradition. You don't need to throw away tradition, or you don't need to disregard tradition in order to give room for your creativity. Carnatic music is a system of music which has always allowed for a happy coexistence of the classical and popular forms. On one side, you have the most sophisticated, Ragam, Tanam, Pallavi. And on the other side, you have, the lighter songs, which have more of popular appeal, maybe like something like Kura Indrumillai or, Bhaja Govindam. And these have existed together. The same musicians are able to, present both the faces or facets of Carnatic music so efficiently and effectively. And finally, the therapeutic value and educative value that Carnatic music offers is something phenomenal. music therapy, though it is, it's been a subject matter for research in the West for several decades now. It's slowly picking up in India. But Carnatic music is making great strides in the field of music research, music therapy. And I would rather call it raga therapy. Our ragas have such healing powers. They have the power to cure so many diseases. They have the power to direct plant and animal behavior. They have the right to stir the elements of nature. So that is the power that our ragas have. And our music also has a lot of educative value. Someshwara in his Manasolasa says, Shikshartham cha vinodartham. So music is not just for vinoda or for entertainment. It must have an educative value. Only then it is called as music. Otherwise, it's cheap entertainment. So it is not considered worthwhile. So that was about the multi-dimensional character or the complete personality of Carnatic music. Now, we see that several attempts are being made to secularize Carnatic music. Many of our many senior musicians, the who's who of Carnatic music, they are coming up with constant complaints and rants that there are a lot of problems and loopholes within the system, because of which Carnatic music is not able to be relevant in the current times, or it is not able to make an impact. And the list is endless. They have a lot of complaints and they have come up with a lot of problems. And let us see what problems they point out and what they try to in what way they try to address these problems. What are the changes they are trying to bring about to solve these problems. Firstly, the first complaint they have is Carnatic music is unable to reach to a global audience. It is unable to attract worldwide audiences. And Carnatic music is not able to become global, and it does not bring about the same experience to a foreigner as to an Indian who has strong roots in our culture and reasonably aware of our history, scriptures, literature, social religious practices and customs. So for him, Carnatic music makes sense, for someone who is within the tradition. But for a foreigner, it does not make any sense. It is not relevant to him. So how do you make him understand Carnatic music? How do you make him appreciate Carnatic music? So there are a lot of problems within the system which we need to address. So the first complaint is that music is unable to reach, our music, Carnatic music is unable to reach the global audience or attract the listeners in a global platform. The second theory is that music is universal. You must not have demarcations like Carnatic music, Hindustani music, Indian music, Western music. We must embrace universalism. So what is this universalism? No one knows. And who defines this universalism? Also, no one knows. Whether it is Western universalism or Indian universalism, who's going to decide what is universalism? Okay. So music is universal is a common theory that often comes up. Language is a hindrance. This is often a complaint. Our music compositions are in our languages like Samskrita or Kannada, mostly South Indian languages like Kannada, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, and Samskrita. And this a foreigner might not understand. If you're singing a Tyagaraja Kriti, which is in Telugu, how will somebody who's sitting in Denmark or Netherlands or somebody who's sitting in New Zealand, how can he understand and appreciate your music? So you remove the language. Language is not, language is a hindrance. But I would say that language matters. Language cannot be taken away from the whole system of Carnatic music. Language is the way you communicate the music. So, but for some musicians, they feel language is a hindrance. Bhakti is a hindrance. The devotional aspect, the sacred dimension of music is a hindrance to its global acceptance. So people are not able to understand Carnatic music because we always always sing in praise of gods and goddesses, and which is not relevant in the current times. All that is old fashioned. So we need to do away with Bhakti. And it has now become a a fancy thing. It has become a fashionable thing to break tradition. As I told you earlier, breaking tradition is something which restricts you. It is regressive. It doesn't offer scope for creativity. It limits your creativity or your innovative ideas. So you need to break tradition, and the quickest way to become popular is to break the tradition, and you become quickly popular. Overnight, you become popular, and someone who breaks tradition is considered as someone who has a lot of guts and who's so bold and brave, and they take it as a matter of pride. So someone who considers tradition, someone who respects tradition is considered as old-fashioned, and someone who breaks the tradition is considered as progressive. And finally, artistic liberty. Carnatic music is something which does not give you scope for artistic liberty. It has too many rules. It is too rigid. The system is too rigid. So there is no scope for any artistic liberty. I'm not free to do what I want. The system is restricting or limiting. And to solve these problems, which these complaints they have, what do they actually do? First thing they do is they remove the bhakti aspect. They openly say that bhakti is a problem. So remove bhakti aspect. So don't sing in praise of gods and goddesses. Rather, sing about a rose, sing about a mountain, sing about social issues, sing about Taliban, you can sing about anything. Okay? Sing about global warming, sing about political issues, sing about social issues. But in my opinion, there are other forms of music to do that. You don't need Carnatic music for that. Okay? Carnatic music has its unique identity, and you must do justice to it. And any innovation or change has to be organic. So it doesn't make any sense to throw away the framework and do whatever you want. So removing the bhakti aspect is one thing which is often done. Doing away with Sahitya. Sahitya, as I said, language is a hindrance. So Sahitya, our compositions which are loaded with words. So a Westerner does not understand it. It is not relevant for him. Okay, you say Bhukti Mukti Pradayakam. What sense does it make to a foreigner? It is totally irrelevant. So if he has to appreciate Carnatic music, Sahitya is coming in the way. The language is coming in the way. So just throw it away. And this argument comes mostly from the instrumentalists who are totally disregarding the compositions of the Trinity or Purandaradasa, just as an example. And they form their own compositions, which are purely instrumental compositions, which have no lyrics. So it is like completely demeaning or disregarding the vocal aspect of music, because vocal aspect of music, you need Sahitya. You obviously need Sahitya to sing. You need words to sing. So Sahitya is a hindrance. Sahitya is a problem. Language is a problem. So remove the Sahitya element from Carnatic music. The next thing they do is rather than traditional Carnatic concerts, do more of fusions. In fact, the Carnatic Hindustani Jugalbandi is also a kind of a fusion. To some extent, that is okay. But beyond that, fusions actually take you nowhere, and in 90 to 95% of the cases, it is the Carnatic music which seems to be nowhere. It is in any fusion music, the Carnatic music is the one that suffers the most. It struggles to retain its identity. Other forms of music, they present it in their own ways, and Carnatic music does not have its own way of presentation. It is like water. It can get into the shape of any container. So that much of adaptability is actually not good, because the identity can't be maintained. So a lot of fusions and collaborations are now being preferred rather than traditional concerts. Nobody is interested in traditional concerts these days because it's boring and we have heard enough. We want change. That is the thing which is often heard. Then they bring about changes in the presentation, the stage decorum, or the way the stage is arranged. There won't be any, it will be totally secular looking. There won't be any photo or idol of any deity, and even the attire of the musician. No longer the kurta veshti, no longer the sari. It is just wear jeans and wear your shoes and go and sing. So what is wrong? So anyway, sacredness element is not important. All that is meaningless. Art is art. So look at art as art. Don't worry about the sacredness. Bhakti is not important. So, and you have to be relevant, modernity, or, being relevant means shunning your tradition. Okay. Being Western is being equal to modern, unfortunately. So that is one thing they do. Openly demeaning our composers and compositions, cherry picking certain phrases from our compositions and demeaning our composers, great saint composers, including the great Sadguru Shri Tyagaraja Swami, has been subject to a lot of, criticism these days, which is very, very unfortunate. And the similar thing has happened with many of our great composers who have been respected and revered throughout, the tradition, but now they are being targeted, or they are being demeaned. And now there's a lot of people are coming up with something called as contemporary Carnatic music. God knows what it is. They want to, just because they want to make Carnatic music, sound like it's relevant, or it's changing, it is adapting to the current times. It's not rigid. They want to show it is not rigid, so they want to make it contemporary. So as I said, you bring about changes in the presentation, you remove the Sahitya, you talk about social issues, current issues, you sing about current issues, and then it becomes contemporary Carnatic music. And openly propagate that music has no religion. Just like terror has no religion, music also has no religion. So Carnatic music, why should it be based on, why should it have Vedic roots? Why should it be connected to Sanatana Dharma? Music has no religion. In fact, people who talk about these things, music, who bat for secular music, neither know the meaning of religion nor do they know the meaning of secularism. That's a different topic altogether. Anyway, and the final thing they do is they blatantly Christianize or Islamize Carnatic music. Okay, this is the last step they do. Of course, Christianization of Carnatic music, you get a lot of support from the missionaries, and a lot of organized efforts are being made to Christianize appropriate Carnatic music and digest Carnatic music into their framework. But when it comes to Islamizing Carnatic music, we don't get a lot of support from the other side, because the basic tenets of Islam doesn't believe in worshipping Allah with music and dance. It is considered as blasphemy. But our musicians are so generous, and they want to embrace universalism. So they go all out to show that music has no religion. So it's kind of being drilled into their heads to appease everyone. Okay, so that extreme appeasement makes you do all these things. You blatantly Christianize music or Islamize music, even though the basic principles of Islam doesn't allow you to sing and dance. Anyway, so this is about what is happening now with Carnatic music, the secularizing thing which is happening now. Now the question is whether it is okay to secularize music. Now we have seen how Carnatic music evolved, how it originated, what is the basic philosophy of music in the Indian perspective. We have learned all that, and we are also seeing what is happening now. Is it okay to secularize Carnatic music? Is Carnatic music moving in the right direction? I would say not at all, because Carnatic music is undoubtedly an integral part of Sanatana Dharma or Vedic culture, as we have already seen. It is our cultural icon. It is one of the sacred treasures of our culture. So a lot of things relating to our culture, our tradition, our practices, our sciences, our knowledge systems have been cunningly stolen from us, and it has been repacked and given to us as something of Western origin. Okay, this has happened with Ayurveda, this has happened with yoga, this has happened with Bharatanatyam, this has happened with everything, right from turmeric to tulsi to neem, everything is being patented, and we are just either silent spectators or we are aiding this whole process. Some of us are aiding this whole process. So we might reach a stage where, of course, the issue of copyright, these kind of things are now slowly surfacing. They are entering the Carnatic music domain. I don't know how, what direction and magnitude it will take, but it's quite worrying to see that it's starting now. So tomorrow we will reach a stage where to sing our own compositions. Let's say my great grandfather was a great composer. Okay, to sing my great grandfather's composer, I'll have to pay royalty to someone. We might reach that stage. So our sacred treasures, all our knowledge systems, art forms, and practices are being stolen from us, and we are oblivious, completely unaware of what is happening, and we are going about talking about universalism and music has no religion, and these kind of ideologies. It amounts to destroying the very identity of Carnatic music. This is very important. So if you try to meddle with what Carnatic music is, it ceases to be Carnatic music. That's it. If you want to bring about, if you want to sing songs pertaining to current issues, about a rose, about a mountain, about a parrot, there are other forms of music to do that. You don't have to meddle with Carnatic music, because it has a history of thousands of years, and we need to act responsibly here. And just for a foreigner to understand your music or appreciate your music, compromising on your core values, what sense does it make? I don't understand. If you have to get a foreigner appreciate the taste of, let's say, puliogre, which is a South Indian dish, you cannot prepare it with some pizza masala or Italian seasoning, because he has to appreciate it, right? He has to appreciate and understand it in its purest form. So you have to present it to him in its original form, in its most authentic form. What is the point in changing it? Carnatic musicians singing or playing like Western music and saying that you're popularizing Carnatic music. You're doing more harm than good. Come on, realize that you're destroying the very identity, character, and personality of Carnatic music in the pretext of popularizing it. And finally, it leads to, secularizing Carnatic music leads to appropriation, which is already happening, and ultimately it will lead to complete digestion of this sacred art form into the Western framework. So the conclusion is that every Carnatic musician has a responsibility to ensure that the core values of our music are not lost in an attempt to make it more popular. So since it is a traditional genre of music having a history of several hundreds of years, every musician has a responsibility and not act irresponsibly just to make it popular and become global. The progressiveness or evolution should not lead to dilution and distortion. That is important. Whatever changes you bring about, it has to be an organic evolution, and that process of evolution must add more to the system and not strip off its essential character. We must bring about meaningful and constructive innovations within the framework of tradition. So tradition, adherence to tradition is extremely important, and the innovations or the creative elements that we introduce must be meaningful and constructive. It must be done with a sense of responsibility. And rather than going with a missionary zeal to propagate and popularize and spread Carnatic music to global audiences by changing the very identity of Carnatic music, I feel it is better to give more education, provide more awareness to people belonging to different cultures and different countries, so that they appreciate Carnatic music in its purest and most authentic form. I think that is the need of the hour, rather than doing something which will do more harm than good.
Could you give an example of an organic change that Carnatic music has had successfully? Just curious.
Okay. The first, there are many, organic developments that have happened in the course of evolution of Carnatic music. For instance, we can take the system of pedagogy that was formulated by Purandaradasa. Till then, it was Raga Karahara Priya, which was used for the beginners' lessons in Carnatic music. And it was Purandaradasa who figured out that Maya Malavagula Raga will be much better than having Karahara Priya in the initial stages, in the beginner stages. And he was the one who formulated all the lessons in the form of the Sarale, Jantivarse, the Tarastai, Mandarastai, Alankaras, and even the Pillari Gitas in Raga Malahari. And that is a classic example of an organic change that he has brought about. And that has enriched the system, that has added so much value to the system. and it has even strengthened the system. Okay, the system of pedagogy in Carnatic music got a scientific dimension, because till then it was not so structured or systematic, and it was he who brought in that element of scientific dimension to the system of learning in Carnatic music. And if you take in several examples in the recent times, contemporary musicians who lived just a few decades ago, for example, the great legend Sangeeta Kalanidhi, Dr. M. Balamurali Krishna, he has made so many innovations. He has brought out a concept called as the Mukhi Tala, which is his novel idea. And there are several musicians like S. Kalyanaraman, who has brought a different raga system called as the Dvimadhyama ragas. G. N. Balasubramaniam, the great musician, is credited with introducing Graha Veda in Ragalapana. There are so many, we can identify in different stages in the evolution of Carnatic music, which has added value, and it has stood the test of time. If it was no good, it would have just faded away. It has stood the test of time, and some of them have acted as a link which paved the way for the next stage in the development of Carnatic music.
What is the difference between Carnatic music and classical music of other parts of India when they are singing the same raga? I don't know how specific you can be with this answer, but yeah, this is the question from Amit Dubeji.
Carnatic music and
classical music of other parts of India. Maybe Hindustani is the other one, right? Especially when they are singing the same raga. So I think he just wants you to... It
is a difference in the way the raga is handled. It is the difference in the way the raga is expressed. It is the difference in the way the compositions are composed in those ragas. So the approach is totally different. Whether it is Hindustani music or Carnatic music, both of these are based on the same concept of nada, shruti, sapta swaras. The technical part is all the same, but the way you approach, the way you present music is different, and particularly the difference lies in the way we handle the gamakas, the oscillations or the embellishments of the swaras in the raga, and that is the main difference.
So, but you also said Bhakti is the main emphasis of Carnatic music. So, would you be able to tell us what the main emphasis of Hindustani music would be? Would it be Shringara?
Shringara, glorifying the king who is patronizing you, singing the praise of, or describing the beauty of nature. Right. It has a lot of elements. It has Bhakti also, it has bhajans also. And again, in Hindustani music, you have two styles. You have the Drupad style and the Khayal style. The Drupad is more, it resembles Carnatic music in several aspects. It is more Bhakti oriented. Whereas Khayal music, particularly it flourished with the patronage of the Mughal kings. And, Tansen, Amir Khusro and all that. So the focus has been more on praising the king who's patronizing you, making him happy, talking of, Savan ka mahina, Barsat, these kind of things. But the approach is different in Carnatic music, where even if you talk about nature, even if you talk about these aspects, as I said, you bring it within the framework of Bhakti. So the sacredness is the underlying current that is running.
I had a question. The point that you had addressed at the end, that it's being secularized. Even popular artists are stripping Carnatic music of its Vedic roots and doing everything in the name of taking it to the masses, other than educating. Because I see that even in the sabhas, fewer and fewer younger audiences are going into the sabhas to listen to traditional formats of concerts. Other than educating them, do you think there is any solid step that the Indics can take in order to prevent this appropriation, especially by Christianity, I think, which is more dangerous than, Islam, which is anyway rejecting it?
Correct.
Do you think there is any legal step, or are there any efforts or attempts to do that? Are there any thoughts amongst musicians to do that? Any kind of a legal step which will prevent, appropriation and also this kind of digestion?
See, when it comes to anything that has got to do with Hinduism, and I'm sure you have also experienced this, or you cannot expect any organized efforts. You cannot expect any collective efforts. It has to be done at the individual level. Each one of us have to create the necessary ecosystem in our homes, and we'll have to do it at our individual levels. We'll have to do our bit to bring about the change in a bigger level, because neither the government nor any government body is actually bothered about these things. We have bodies like Ministry of Culture, you have All India Radio, you have Doordarshan, and they're actually doing nothing, except having a half an hour slot for Carnatic music once in a week. That's no good. So we cannot depend on either the government or any systematic or organization to help us out with this great work job of preserving and propagating Carnatic music. I think we'll have to do it at individual levels, and like-minded people, have to come together and form small communities and organizations. In fact, that is how it has survived. Historically, you look at it, sabhas, people with 4, South Indian families, they, let's say they meet in a city in USA, they join together and form a Carnatic music sangam, and that has happened in every nook and corner of India as well. In the smallest of cities and towns, and even at the village level, if music has survived, if the cultural aspect of the cultural dimension of music has survived, it is because of individual efforts. And personally, for me, I would, as a listener who would want to experience Carnatic music, I would want to experience it in smaller places where, more intimate and informal setup, rather than listen to Carnatic music in a big hall which can accommodate 1,000, people. For me, Carnatic music is something, it's a part of my life. So
it's a very personal thing.
Intimate, it's a very personal thing. I look at it that way. So whether at all we should commercialize this and is a very tricky question, I would say. True. And at what cost you do it?
Right.
So striking that balance becomes very essential, and we must try to do it to the best of our abilities, is what I can say.
Yeah. So like you said, it's perhaps, it starts at the roots, at the level of every family.
Yes. And when you're talking of younger generation, it is how we train our kids, what kind of ethos that we give them at homes, what kind of schools we send them to. And other than the school, whether we put them in other kind of community activities and other kind of classes, and what is the kind of lifestyle that we expose them to. And what is the kind of life we lead? That's more important, because children will do what you do, not what you say. True. So that becomes very important. And as I said, for somebody to appreciate and understand Carnatic music, particularly a youngster, it is very important that he has some roots in our history, in our Hindu tradition and practices, our Itihasa, Purana, Ramayana, Mahabharata, these kind of things. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult. He will feel disconnected, for sure.
Right.
So you will have to, it's a big task. It is not just you are teaching music or you are exposing them to good music, not just the artistic dimension of it, but the whole picture.